I was driving past a church the other day, big, beautiful building, and right next to the Sunday service 10 a.m. sign, there was this other sign. It was, let's call it politically suggestive.
Suggestive how? Like, thou shalt vote for Proposition 6.
Not quite that explicit. It was more of a real Christians vote their values paired with a list of values that, just happen to align perfectly with one specific candidate's platform.
Ah, the classic wink and a nod.
Exactly. And it got me thinking about that invisible line. We all kind of know there are rules. Churches, charities, the good guys, they aren't supposed to play politics.
That is the theory, at least. That's the social contract we think we have.
But then I open up the stack of research you send over for this deep dive, and honestly, I feel like I've been living in a fantasy world.
It's a bit of a shock to the system, isn't it?
It is. We're talking about a machinery of influence in this country that makes the actual candidates look like window dressing.
It is the engine beneath the hood, and it's terrifyingly complex. It is a machine built almost entirely out of paper, specifically the paper of the United States tax code.
And we aren't just talking about a few yard signs or a suggestive church marquee. We're looking at data here, specifically the 2024 election cycle. $1.9 billion in dark money.
Billion. With a B.
With a B. And that's just in federal races, right?
Yeah, that doesn't even count the state and local levels where, a few $1,000s can swing a school board election or a city council race.
That number is just so hard to wrap your head around, $1.9 billion. And the craziest part, a huge chunk of that money is moving through channels that were originally designed for soup kitchens.
And social welfare.
Yeah.
That's the irony we're going to unpack today, isn't it?
It is. The U.S. tax code, and specifically the difference between a 501c and a 501c4, has arguably shaped American history more than most presidents. So today, we're doing a forensic audit of American democracy. We've got IRS revenue rulings. We've got these legal memos from heavy hitters like Skadden Arps that are, frankly, a little scary to read.
You're dense.
Very dense. And we've got the receipts on how charity became the ultimate political weapon.
So we're going to answer the question, why can a church lose its tax status for calling a candidate a sinner, but a so-called social welfare group can spend millions poisoning the well against that same candidate and keep every single one of its donors secret?
It's the alphabet soup of influence. Buckle up. Let's start with the group everyone thinks they understand. The good guys.
Yeah.
The 501c3 organizations.
Right. So in your head, this is the Red Cross. It's your local university. It's the animal shelter where you got your dog.
And legally, what's the IRS definition?
Legally, the tax code defines these as entities organized for, religious, charitable, scientific, or educational purposes. But the defining feature, the thing that makes them so special, is the tax deduction.
This is the carrot.
The massive golden carrot. If you are in a high tax bracket and you give $10,000 to a 501c3, you can write that off against your income. The government is essentially subsidizing that donation.
So I pay less tax because I gave that money.
Correct. Which means the taxpayers are effectively subsidizing the organization.
That's a really important point.
It is. And because the public purse is involved, the government demands neutrality. They say, we will subsidize your good works, but we will not subsidize your politics.
Which brings us to the stick, the famous Johnson Amendment. Now, I always assumed this was named after Johnson because he was, a stickler for bureaucratic rules.
Oh, no, not at all.
Or maybe he just really loved church-state separation.
Absolutely not. This is pure political revenge. This is one of the juiciest parts of tax history, I think.
Okay, tell me more.
So back in 1954, Lyndon B. Johnson was a senator running for re-election in Texas, and he was not having an easy time of it. There was this nonprofit group, the Committee for Constitutional Government, that was absolutely hammering him.
And they were a charity.
They were tax exempt. And they were calling him a communist, a socialist, attacking his record day in and day out. So LBJ looks at this and says, wait a minute, why is the government subsidizing my enemies?
He wasn't trying to save the soul of the church. He was trying to save his own Senate seat.
100%. In a closed-door committee session, he literally hand-wrote this amendment into the tax code. There were no hearings, no big public debate.
He just slipped it in.
Slipped it in to shut them up.
That is incredibly on land for LBJ.
It really is. And the text he wrote is absolute. It says a 501c3 is absolutely prohibited from participating in or intervening in any political campaign on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for elective public office.
Absolutely prohibited. That feels rare in law. Usually there's wiggle room. Reasonably prohibited or mostly prohibited.
You'd think, But the statute is stark. No endorsements, no campaign contributions. If you are a C3, you cannot give a dime to a candidate, period.
But, and here's where the rubber meets the road. We see charities and churches talking about politics all the time.
Yeah.
So how absolute is absolute?
This is where we get into the facts and circumstances test. This is the IRS's way of saying, we'll know it when we see it.
So it's not a bright red line.
Not at all. It's a vibe check.
Which is terrifying if you're a pastor or a nonprofit director. You're betting your entire existence on an IRS agent's interpretation of your vibe.
Correct. And we have case studies in the stack that show just how tricky this gets. Let's look at the classic violation. The church at Pierce Creek in 1992.
This is the Bill Clinton's a sinner ad. I remember this.
Right. This church bought a full-page ad in USA Today and the Washington Times. It didn't just discuss abortion or family values in the abstract.
It was specific.
Very specific. It cited biblical passages, listed Clinton's positions, called him a sinner, and then explicitly asked the question, how then can we vote for Bill Clinton?
Okay, see, even I know you can't say the word vote. That's the third rail. If you say vote for or vote against, you're done.
You are done. The IRS revoked their tax-exempt status. The church sued, and the court upheld the revocation. That is the system working as designed. You cross the line, you lose the status. Simple.
But then look at the 2004 case. This one feels so much stickier to me. This was the Jesus debate.
Yes. This was a guest preacher at a church in California just 2 weeks before the election between George W. Bush and John Kerry.
So high-tension election.
Very. And the sermon was titled, If Jesus Debated Senator Kerry and President Bush. That is a catchy title, you have to admit.
I'd listen to that podcast.
Me too. The preacher went through specific issues. War, poverty, the economy, and, surprise, surprise, in his hypothetical debate, Jesus seemed to disagree with everything President Bush had done in the last 4 years.
But he never said the magic words. He never said vote for Kerry.
No. He closed by telling the congregation to vote their deepest values.
That is such a cop-out. Vote your values implies vote for the guy who agrees with Jesus, who I just told you is not George Bush.
Precisely. It's a wink and a nod. The IRS investigated. They looked at the facts and circumstances and determined that the sermon did constitute impermissible campaign intervention. They said it crossed the line.
So they revoked the status?
No.
What?
They gave the church a warning.
Wait, why the difference? The Clinton ad gets the death penalty, the anti-Bush sermon gets a slap on the wrist. What's the logic there?
Because revoking a church's tax status is a nuclear option. It's a PR nightmare for the IRS. They do not want to be seen as shutting down religious institutions.
So unless you are just screamingly obvious.
Like buying a newspaper ad explicitly saying, don't vote for this guy, they often hesitate to pull the trigger.
This creates a massive gray zone, doesn't it? It basically tells organizations you can walk right up to the edge of the cliff, just don't jump off.
And that's where the code words come in. The Alliance for Justice, which is a major advocacy group, has these legal guides advising nonprofits on how to stay safe. And they warn about surreptitious campaigning.
Surreptitious, great word.
It means sneaking it in. If you use terms like conservative, liberal, pro-life, or pro-choice, and you couple that with a discussion of the upcoming election, you are walking into a trap.
So if I run a charity and I put out a newsletter that says, it's vital that we elect a pro-life candidate this November, I've broken the rules.
Likely, yes. Even if you don't name the candidate, the implication is clear enough for the IRS to see it as intervention.
So how do they talk about issues at all?
This is the loophole. Voter guides.
I see those all the time.
Yeah.
Here's where the candidates stand.
Correct. But legally, they have to be neutral. They have to cover a broad range of issues. You can't just pick the 3 issues where your preferred candidate looks like a saint and the opponent looks like a monster.
It has to be a fair comparison.
It has to at least look fair. If the guide appears biased in its structure or its questions, it fails the test.
It's a tightrope walk.
Yeah.
And looking at the source on national party conventions, it gets even stricter, which seems crazy.
Oh, the conventions are a minefield. 501c often want to be there because that's where the donors and the energy are. They want to hold panels on climate change or gun safety.
But they're literally inside the partisan belly of the beast.
Right. And the rules say they can't have any partisan materials in their event space.
None.
0. No buttons, no signs, no bumper stickers. If you are a charity hosting a panel on clean water at the DMC and a donor walks in wearing a Vote for Him t-shirt, you arguably have a problem if you let them stay and hand out literature.
That seems almost impossible to police.
It is incredibly difficult. But the risk is that you are using tax-subsidized resources, the venue, the staff time, to promote a candidate. And that is a cardinal sin.
Okay, before we move on to the dark money side of things, I want to clear up one confusion that I think a lot of people have. We keep saying they can't campaign, but charities do lobby, right? I see them in Washington all the time.
They do. And this is a huge misconception. Campaigning is about who gets elected. Lobbying is about what laws get passed.
So a 501c3 can lobby.
Yes. They can go to Congress and say, please pass the Clean Air Act. That's perfectly fine.
But there's a limit.
Yes. It cannot be a substantial part of their activities.
And what on earth does substantial mean? 10%, 20%?
Well, under the old rule, nobody knew. It was totally subjective. But there is a very cool detail in the tax code called the 5018 election.
That sounds like a secret society. The 5018 election?
It's actually a safety valve. It's a way out of the ambiguity. Public charities can choose to file this election, and it replaces that vague substantial part rule with a precise mathematical test.
So it gives them a budget, a hard cap.
Exactly. It removes the guesswork. Generally, it allows them to spend up to 20% of their first $500,000 of exempt purpose expenditures on lobbying, and the percentage slides down as their budget gets bigger.
So it's a clear, bright line.
A bright line. If you stay under the cap, you're safe. If you go over, you pay an excise tax. It's a way for charities to have a voice in legislation without fearing they will accidentally lose their status because an IRS agent thinks they were too loud.
Okay, so that's the world of the 501c3. Heavily regulated, tax-deductible, trying to do good while walking on a million eggshells regarding politics.
A minefield of good intentions.
Exactly. Now, let's flip the coin. Let's talk about the bad boy of the tax code, the 501c4.
This is where the engine of influence really revs up.
It's called a social welfare organization, which honestly sounds just as nice as a charity. Who could be against social welfare?
The name is very, very friendly. But the rules are fundamentally different. In the world of influence, the C4 is the attack dog.
Let's break down the key differences. Why would a billionaire donor choose a C4 over a C3?
There are two main reasons, and they are both huge. First, the superpower. A 501c4 can engage in partisan political activity.
So they can do what the C3 can't.
Everything the C3 can't. They can endorse candidates, they can run ads that say support Senator Smith, they can get their hands dirty.
And the second reason, this is the big one.
This is the big one, the shield. Anonymity. Generally, they do not have to publicly disclose their donors.
This is the dark in dark money.
Precisely. You have unlimited donations from corporations, from individuals, from unions, and the public doesn't get to know who wrote the check.
But wait, if they can play politics and hide the donors, why isn't every political campaign just a C4? Why does the Biden campaign or the Trump campaign even exist as a separate entity?
Because there is a catch. There's always a catch. It's called the primary purpose rule. Meaning politics cannot be the organization's primary purpose. It has to be secondary to its main mission of social welfare.
Is there a number on that, a percentage?
It is often cited as the 49.9% rule. Now, this isn't explicitly written in the statute as 49.9%, but it's the working standard that has developed over time.
The 49.9% rule.
The idea is that if you spend 51% of your money on actual social welfare, education, community building, whatever, then the other 49.9% can be pure bare-knuckle politics.
So if I have $10 million in my C4 bank account, I can spend nearly $5 million on attack ads as long as I spend just over $5 million on...
What counts as the good spending? This is where it gets incredibly cynical. You can use that good money, that 51%, to run ads that sound political but technically aren't. We call it issue advocacy.
Give me an example. Walk me through the difference between a political ad and an issue ad. Let's say we want to defeat Senator Jones.
Okay, so we want to defeat Senator Jones. Option A is a political ad. Vote against Senator Jones. He's a crook and his policies are destroying our town. That counts toward your bad 49.9%.
Clear enough. What's option B?
Option B is the issue ad. Did you know Senator Jones voted to let corporations dump sludge in your river? Call Senator Jones today and tell him to stop poisoning our kids.
That sounds pretty political to me. You're attacking his record right before an election.
To you and me, yes. To the IRS, that is educational. That is lobbying. That counts toward your social welfare 51%.
That is unbelievable. So you use the issue ads to basically subsidize the direct attack ads.
It's a self-reinforcing loop. You saturate the airwaves with negative information about the candidate under the guise of education, which then gives you the mathematical headroom to run the explicit vote him out ads closer to election day.
Let's talk about the scale of this. You mentioned $1.9 billion in dark money in the 2024 cycle. How does that money actually move? Because I assume the billionaires isn't just handing a bag of cash to the TV station.
No, it's a shell game. It's a very sophisticated process. We have a great explanation from the ProPublica source material. It's designed to break the chain of custody on the money.
Okay, so follow the dollar. Let's try.
All right, step one. A wealthy donor wants to influence an election, but doesn't want their name on a Federal Election Commission report. Maybe they run a public company and they're worried about a boycott.
So they can't give to the candidate directly, and they can't give to a super PAC directly because super PACs have to disclose their donors.
Right. So step two, the donor gives millions of dollars to a 501c4. That transaction is private. The IRS sees it, maybe, but the public does not.
And then what does the C4 do with that money?
The C4 can run its own ads like we just discussed. Or, and this is very common, the C4 turns around and donates that money to a super PAC.
But wait, I thought you just said the super PAC has to list its donors.
It does. And on its public disclosure form, the super PAC lists the donation. It says, donation received from Americans for a brighter future.
Which is the name of the 501c4.
Exactly. It doesn't list the original human being or corporation who gave the money.
So the trail goes cold at the C4. It's a dead end for reporters and the public.
It's a laundry machine. The money goes in dirty, meaning anonymous, and comes out clean, meaning disclosed, but the source has been completely wiped.
Is that actually legal? It feels like it shouldn't be. It feels like money laundering.
It is a razor's edge, technically. If you set up the C4 solely for the purpose of hiding the donor, it's illegal. That's a conduit contribution.
But proving that intent is the hard part.
It's nearly impossible. Unless you have an email where the donor says, please use this C4 to hide my name, and people have been caught doing that, it is very hard to prosecute. The defense is always, no, I gave to the C4 because I support their broad social welfare mission. What they did with the money later was their choice.
Plausible deniability.
Baked right into the system.
I want to be clear here.
Okay.
Because I think people tend to associate this with one side or the other, depending on their own political bubble. But the sources show this is a bipartisan sport.
Absolutely. It is an arms race. 100%.
So on the right.
If you look at the right, you have groups like Crossroads GPS. This was the heavyweight champion for a while, associated with Karl Rove. The source notes that in election years, their political spending would spike to nearly 40% of their total funds.
Just writing that 49.9% line.
Pushing right up against it. And then in non-election years, it would drop to zero. They were turning the political faucet on and off as needed. You have Arabella Advisors. This is a massive network, and one of its key players is the 1630 Fund. The sources indicate that in 2022 alone, the 1630 Fund poured $196 million of secret money into the political world.
$196 million from one group.
In 1 year. And interestingly, one of our sources points out that recently the liberal dark money behemoths have arguably outpaced the conservatives. Reports from the 2020 cycle showed liberal dark money groups spending over $400 million.
So while Democrats in Congress have introduced legislation like the Disclose Act to try and stop this, their side is utilizing the machinery just as aggressively as the Republicans.
If one side disarms, they lose. So both sides keep building bigger and bigger C4s.
So we had the C3s doing the good work, but they're handcuffed. Yeah, the C4s doing the dark work, but they're limited to 49%.
Yeah.
It seems like the smartest play is not to choose one, but they have both.
And that is exactly what the modern political hydra looks like. We call it the dual structure.
How does that work? Do they have two separate buildings, two different letterheads?
Usually not. You take a major organization. Let's look at ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, as a prime example, or the NRA on the right. They aren't just one thing. They are complex.
Okay, so I walk into the ACLU lobby.
And on the left side of the hallway, metaphorically, is the ACLU Foundation. That's the 501c. If you write a check to them, it's tax deductible. That money pays for litigation, education, research, all the good stuff.
And on the right side of the hallway?
That's just the ACLU, the 501c4. That entity can lobby Congress without the spending limits, and it can engage in direct political pressure campaigns.
And they share staff. How does that work?
Often, yes. They just have to track their hours meticulously on different timesheets. From 9 to 12, I was educating the public for the C3. From 1 to 5, I was lobbying Congress for the C4.
That requires some incredible accounting gymnastics.
It's an entire industry of compliance lawyers. But it allows them to be a full-stack political operator. They can maximize revenue with the tax breaks on one side and maximize muscle with the political attacks on the other.
Speaking of muscle, I want to talk about how this pressure works in the real world. Because it's not just about buying TV ads, it's about narrative control. We have this incredible story in the source stack about the log cabin Republicans from 1995.
This is a perfect example of how a C4 can exert pressure using shame and media rather than just advertising dollars. The Log Cabin Republicans, or LCR, is a group representing gay Republicans. They operate as a C4.
And Bob Dole is a candidate.
Yes. In 1995, Bob Dole was the clear frontrunner for the GOP nomination. The LCR made a $1,000 contribution to his campaign.
$1,000? That's not a lot of money in a presidential race. That's a rounding error.
It's a token amount. It's a symbolic gesture. But Bob Dole's campaign returned the check. They sent it back.
Why?
Because they didn't want to be publicly associated with a gay group during a Republican primary. They thought it would hurt them with the conservative base.
Wow. So what did the LCR do? Did they just accept the rejection?
No. They went nuclear. They leaked the story to the press. Bob Dole rejects gay Republicans.
And the media ate it up.
Oh, completely. The Washington Post, the New York Times, they all ran these scathing editorials slamming Dole. They called him a flip-flopper, a hypocrite, intolerant. The narrative shifted overnight from Dole is the inevitable leader to Dole is weak and scared.
Because he was trying to have it both ways.
Yeah.
He wanted their support privately but not publicly.
Exactly. And under that intense media pressure, Dole crumbled. He held a press briefing and admitted that returning the check was a mistake. He even blamed his staff for doing it without his permission.
So the C4 used its status not to buy an ad, but to create a media firestorm that forced a presidential candidate to flip-flop in public.
That is the power of these organizations. They can define the terms of the debate and expose hypocrisy.
But there are lines you can't cross. We talked about the shell game earlier. Is that always legal? Can you just set up a C4 to funnel money?
Not always. And this brings us to a really serious legal concept called honest services fraud. We have a memo from Skadden Arps that highlights this danger zone.
Honest services fraud sounds like something from a mob movie.
It's a very serious federal offense. Basically, the idea is that the public is entitled to the honest services of their elected officials. So if a C4 spends money to benefit a public official, like a big ad buy or a donation, and there is a clear link to an official act by that politician, it can be prosecuted as fraud.
Even if there isn't a written contract saying, I give you money, you give me this law.
Yes, you don't need a direct quid pro quo agreement. If the evidence suggests a corrupt link, you are in big trouble. And specifically regarding the shell game, the Department of Justice is watching for those pure conduits we mentioned.
What's a conduit case look like in real life?
There was a specific case mentioned, U.S. v. Fuentes-Fernandez. In that case, a superpay president was actively setting up C4s for the sole purpose of hiding donors. He was literally texting contributors saying things like, you can use a third party to not disclose the true donor.
Okay, rule number 1 of committing federal crimes. Don't text about the federal crimes.
Indeed. He pleaded guilty. So while the system allows for privacy, if you are purely using a C4 as a pass-through to hide a name, that is illegal. It has to be a legitimate organization with its own social welfare mission, however flimsy that might be.
So we've covered the legal structures. Now I want to move to the battlefield itself. Section 4 in our outline. Where is this money actually going? Because the sources say ad spending is just exploding.
It is. The data shows that 2024 political ad spending jumped nearly 30% compared to 2020. That is a massive increase in just 4 years.
And it's not just the 6 o'clock news anymore, right? I feel like every time I open Hulu or YouTube, I'm getting hit with a political ad.
That's the big shift. Connected TV or CTV and streaming services, Hulu, Roku, YouTube TV. This allows for hyper-targeting. They aren't just blasting an entire city with one ad anymore. They are targeting specific demographics in specific neighborhoods based on your viewing habits.
But there's another layer here that I found really intriguing. We talked about the good guys and the bad guys, but what about the culture guys? The source material brings up the Obamas and their production company, Higher Ground.
This is a fascinating evolution of influence. Higher Ground has a massive deal with Netflix. They produce content like American Factory, Crip Camp, or the series The G Word.
I've seen American Factory. It's a great documentary. It's about a factory in Ohio taken over by a Chinese company.
It is. And it deals with unions, globalization, the decline of American industry. These are deeply political themes. But is it campaigning?
No, of course not. It's a movie. It's on Netflix.
Exactly. Under the tax code, this isn't a political expenditure. It's entertainment. But think about the impact. If you produce a movie that shapes how millions of people view government dysfunction or the importance of national parks, you are shaping the voters' worldview long before an election cycle even begins.
It's like tilling the soil before you plant the seeds.
Perfectly put. It is cultural soft power. And this is something the smartest donors and operatives are figuring out. Why spend $10 million on attack ads in October when you can spend $10 million on a documentary in January that changes how people feel about the underlying issue?
It's inception versus basic marketing.
Right. And traditional C4s are trying to figure out how to get into this game of cultural production.
But not all influence is on a screen. Sometimes it's in the street. And our final section here looks at the economics of protest. We tend to think of protests as spontaneous people getting mad and marching.
The pure grassroots ideal.
Right. But the sources paint a picture of a very expensive, very logistical operation. We're calling this democracy on the ground. But maybe we should call it democracy on the budget.
It is not cheap to be angry in public. If you want to organize a legal, sustained protest in a major city, you are looking at significant and often surprising costs.
Let's talk about New York City. The permit guide we looked at is intense. It's not just filling out a form saying, hey, can we march down this street?
No. It is a maze of bureaucratic hurdles. You need detailed site plans. You need insurance.
Short-term special event insurance. That's a real thing.
It is. And if you are setting up a stage or any kind of temporary structures, you might need anemometers.
Wind speed monitors. You need a weather station for a protest.
For safety, if the wind gets too high, you have to shut down the stage. These are costs that a group of college kids with a good idea can't easily cover. It requires institutional backing.
And then there's the security cost. This was shocking. We have a source discussing the Luigi effect.
This refers to the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson. That event sent a massive shockwave through the corporate and political world.
How did that impact the cost of dissent on the ground?
It drove up the price of private security exponentially. The source mentions that a single private security agent now costs around $250 per hour. A 10-man team for a single day can cost between $25,000 and $30,000.
$30,000 a day just for security.
Yes. So if you are a protest movement, you need to protect your leaders. Or if you are protesting a corporation, they are now spending millions to protect theirs. The financial bar to even participate in public life has been raised.
One researcher we looked at called this the financialization of protest.
That's the key term. It means that to be effective, grassroots movements are often forced to align with those well-funded C3 and C4 networks we talked about earlier, just to survive.
So if I'm a genuine grassroots organizer and I can't afford the insurance and the anemometers and the bodyguards,
you risk incapacitation. You get hit with fines you can't pay, legal fees you can't afford, or you just can't get the permit in the first place. So you have to go to the big donors. You have to go to the Hydra.
So the whole thing circles back to the money. The grassroots protest needs the C4 funding. The C4 gets its money from the secret billionaire. And the C3 provides the tax write-off to keep the lights on for the educational arm that supports the whole thing.
It is a completely integrated ecosystem. You cannot separate the protest in the street from the tax deduction in the accountant's office. They are two sides of the same coin.
This has been a wild ride through the tax code. We started with a definition of charity and somehow ended up with a billion-dollar industry of shadow influence, Hollywood movie deals, and high-priced bodyguards.
It really highlights the core tension in American democracy. We have the 501c rules, the Johnson Amendment, which were designed, however cynically, to try and keep charity pure, to separate the good works from the dirty politics.
But the 501c4 rules have inadvertently created this massive, gaping loophole.
A loophole that has swallowed the system. It allows for anonymous political warfare on an industrial scale.
So what does this all mean for the listener? What's the takeaway?
It means that when you see an ad or a protest or even a documentary, you have to ask, who is paying for this and why can't I see their name? Which head of the Hydra is talking to me right now?
And here is the final provocative thought I want to leave you with. The entire system is designed to separate charity from politics. We have these separate, neat little buckets in the tax code. But in the modern world, buying an ad, making a movie, organizing a protest, or funding a think tank, these are all just different line items in the same budget of influence.
Right. It's all the same money, just wearing different hats to get the best tax advantage.
So if a 501c4 can hide its donors while shaping the laws that govern all of us, do we actually know who is running the country, or are we just watching a puppet show where the strings are made of tax code?
That is the question.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.